Alright, it's time for my third and final layer. So I've removed all my salt as I was working on the second and even the first layer. I was using salt, made sure there was no salt on that nebula. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some white gouache or white watercolor. I don't use this often, but this is one of those things that if I look at the reference photo, there's those white stars. There's ways to go about leaving the white of the paper, but we're going to be adding this with like a spatter technique. So if you don't want to try this, that's okay. You can also just dot in your stars. But what I did is I got a really healthy amount of white on there on my brush. I'm going to take another brush and I'm just going to lightly tap it. So this is going to give me some unpredictable dots. As I run out of paint, they're going to get smaller. So now I'm going in and adding the small ones. So I would let that dry. See what that white looks like when it dries. If it's too light, go back with another coat where I just haven't added as much water. So that's the last one, or the last step for the nebula. Now I'm looking at my landscape or the sun setting over the lake, and what I'm doing here is really just adding those final details of the reeds or the foreground, these more crisp details. So I have mixed up a darker green, and remember I do that by mixing two complements together. So green with a little bit of red there, and I'm using, I mean that's a fairly large brush, that's a number 6 brush. I'm using the point to add another layer of those reeds or grass right on top. Not everywhere. This is going to give us a little bit more depth. There's the smaller ones. So not much to do for the third layer in the landscape. If you want to use this up above in some of your darker clouds, that would not be a bad idea. I almost forgot that little bird. So there you go, voila. Now this one, my fish, this is going to take the most amount of work, and this is where I really do want to have my reference photo out next to me. I'm going to have to add a lot of that detail with the pink or the blue. There's a little bit of green in there, the eye. So I like to start with the lighter colors, lighter values first. So that's my pink or my red. Let me get some of that mixed up really quick. Red. Like I said on the second layer video, the second and third layer, this is where I'm using a few more unmixed colors, a few more pigment, really strong pigments just from the watercolor set. So here now I am just adding, and this is not really wet into wet, I'm adding the detail. You can be as loose as you would like. You can be a little bit more rigid or controlled. It's really up to you. The style of the painting can be what you make it. So if you decide you still want to keep that loose feeling to it, you might drop in some other colors while you're painting this third layer. Alright, this line. Now there are a lot more details for me to add, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to show you generally how I approach those. So I'm working with my lightest color, then I'm going to go back to my darker colors. Might want to add some more blues, that teal color. For this, since I do want it to be a little tighter, I don't want to get that into my reds or pinks that I just painted. So I'm going to carefully avoid that. This guy does have a little bit of a dotted texture in some areas. So notice my painting and my photo references, I don't have the same colors. That's okay, that's your choice as an artist. And my choice was to make it a little bit more blue-purple. I'm going to get a little bit of yellow in here. Remember, as I've been saying all along, the colors do dry a lot lighter than what they are when they're wet. So I'm going to kind of let that dry. I think it's going to lighten up a little bit more than I would like. So I'll have to kind of approach that later. So now I'm looking out here. Before I finish the fish detail with the fin and the eye, I'm going to look out in the background and see if there's anything else I'd like to add. I just did a little bit of yellow on the fish, so I want to make sure that's related, that I see that in my background too. So I'm going to paint a few layers here, or a few objects here in the background with yellow, so it harmonizes, that principle of harmony. I'm also trying to balance it. So if I put it here, I'm putting it here. Maybe I'll have a little glimpse of it over here. Yellow's not a really overpowering color. It's really subtle because it's so light. So I do want to use it in other places, but I don't have to be really concerned about it taking over. So I'm going to let this dry, and then the last thing I'm going to come back to is paint that eye and that fin.